Hello, guys, and welcome back to another live stream of LFC Transfer Room. Today, joined by two lovely gentlemen. Colin, I'll start with you, mate. How you doing today?
Great today. Good weather for late November, and I'll take what I can get.
Yeah, and Nahum, bit of a it's international break. International weekends always boring, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not very eventful. No, so I saw someone posting the other day about they've sort of caught up with their misses for the first time in a few months during the international break, and turns out they're actually all right. I can relate to this experience. Cut off my girlfriend regular season, so this week's come by and I've spoken to her for the first time in a few months. She's all right.
I know. I would say the same, but I've a newish born son, so he's causes a lot of stuff. So he's a fun little guy though. He started learning how to point now, so that's a nice little milestone. He's going around pointing at everything. But enough about girlfriends and babies. We're here to talk about the Reds. So obviously, international break, not much going on. Obviously, it's we'll start off with not the main talking point, but Dominik Szoboszlai, obviously, absolute masterclass. Don't know who he played. If you do, was it Montenegro or something?
Yeah,
Montenegro. 1-0 down. He come back, scored two. First one, a very, very, very nice goal. Very Eden Hazard-esque, might I say. And then a few minutes later, scored another one. So, obviously, Hungary are now through to the Euros. They're one of the teams confirmed. So, basically, what we're taking from this is Dominik Szoboszlai can drag Hungary, but Odegaard, Nail, and Haaland can't. So, Szoboszlai, Odegaard is definitely what I got from there. But, Colin, we'll talk a little bit about Szoboszlai. I mean, he's an absolute talisman for that Hungary side. Obviously, Jamie is here saying Hungary keeper's insane. Peter Galashki, if memory serves me right, if he's still playing international football, if not somebody else. But when someone's shining that much on international football around the players he's playing with, no disrespect to Hungary, but he's dropping 10 out of 10 performances. It's a good sign, and I think that he probably needed something like this because I feel like he was starting to maybe rush himself a little bit with Liverpool. He was starting to not look as amazing, which obviously is a high standard, but that's the standard he's set for himself. But what are your thoughts on his goals today and kind of the international break in general?
Yeah, I thought the first one was genuinely incredible, like really, really special goal. And through the I didn't watch the entire game, but through the highlights I had seen of his, he's able to control the game from so many different places on the field, and able to really affect the game in so many different ways. And they use him, at Hungary use him in a almost, especially I think the second half looked like they use him really like almost Sadio Mane-esque, like really wide and cutting in. And just thought he was, he's just boss. He's so good. If we ever have an injury to that left wing, he's available apparently.
Oh, well, that's good. Obviously, Nahum being a good international break for Liverpool. Mohamed Salah got 4, Luis Diaz got 2. Alisson put in a man of the match performance, but got let down by the fact that Brazil can't defend across into a box. Who else? Nunes as well scored. I know just the South Americans still have games to play. Trent putting in another man of the match performance for England in midfield. It's been ahead of probably the biggest game of the year, Man City away. I'm sure it's not Anfield. Yeah, not Anfield. It is good, isn't it? The fact that all our players are, first of all, getting okay minutes and getting goals to boost up confidence, and also not getting injured.
I would agree. Yeah, it was. It felt like at the time a bit of a sort of spot the Liverpool player. That's the thing I was seeing around online. So you compare the like I guess Sofa Score kind of ratings, the stats of each game, and you could see exactly who was playing for Liverpool. I mean, so Harvey Elliott scored outside the box sort of screamer the other day for the under-21s. Like you say, Trent man of the match, Luis Diaz 2-1 from 1-0, I think it was. Szoboszlai pulling out of the bag, same sort of thing. We have to see how the Dutch guys are playing. I'm not sure when they're playing.
I think Virgil put in a great performance as well for Netherlands. So
it seems sort of across the board, like you say, ahead of the Manchester City game, that you can point to most of the squad putting in the work for their national team, and to the, a sparkling degree. It's been very, very impressive so far. And yeah, I mean, the only injury I think we've suffered is Kanate, maybe Gravenberch, but they didn't do it on international duty, so that's all right. And then, yeah, I mean, we'll come back after the international break. We'll see how it translates into the league performance. But right now, very encouraging, like you say.
Yeah, definitely. Also, hello to everybody watching. Make sure you do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, get your comments in. We'll, if there's any questions, any random ones, we'll get them answered at the end. So just ask them through the stream and I'll start them. But J Muse as well, how you doing? Yeah, sad news about Bobby's dad passing away from a heart attack. I saw that. Obviously, thoughts are with the Firmino family. Another thing I kind of just want to bring up really quickly and get your guys' thoughts on is, obviously, don't know if you saw the video of Mohamed Salah with Egypt today against Sierra Leone. Some fans ran onto the pitch and tried to attack him. Security and Egyptian players managed to kind of rush people off. But I'm looking at a picture now, and the main person who instigated it is wearing a Manchester City shirt. So, it's not looking great. Obviously, it could just be a pure coincidence, but, calling a fan running onto a pitch to attack a Liverpool player in a Man City shirt, it's not a great look for Manchester City, is it?
It is not. I mean, it'd be funny to make jokes about, the city conglomerate, paying some people to do some things. I'm certain that is not the case, but that's a funny headcanon to go down. Some scary scenes, like just having people, and that amount of people, like just being able to run on the field and kind of chase after anybody's player, regardless of whether or not it's Mo or any other Liverpool player, or any other player who's on the field. Just so happens that in this case it seems to be targeted at Mo, and that kind of like player safety needs, I think always needs like constant reviewing, so that nothing truly bad ever does happen in that regard. Could be, turned out fine, but could have been scary, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Nahum, I don't know if you saw it, but initial thoughts, I mean, it only happened a few hours ago, so it's kind of new, but it's not what you want to see. And obviously, it's not a regular occurrence, thankfully, but it has happened in Africa, where maybe regulations aren't as up to date as they are, or security aren't as up to date, as they would be in Europe. But definitely something you don't want to see, and especially ahead of the biggest game in the Premier League next weekend.
Yeah, I mean, no comment. I'm not going to sort of talk about whether it's obviously the City fans as a whole, obviously not. But I think when you see someone in a City shirt, the motive's sort of clear. It is targeted in a way. It's no coincidence that we're facing them next. But equally, ragtag group of City fans don't represent the rest. I would, it's always sad to see something like that take place, but it's something that I suppose Salah and everyone else will just have to move past, and hopefully they get what's coming to them. But I mean, thank God they didn't succeed. I'm not going to cast any aspersions about City's motivations, but I'm sure they wouldn't be shedding a tear for Mohamed Salah if he got a bit of a bus stop in a game ahead of theirs. So, but as you say, can't really blame them. But it's a shame that it happened. I didn't see it, no, but it's quite crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone in the stream hasn't saw it on our Twitter, so you can go and check it out over there. But while we're on the subject of Manchester City, I guess we'll just touch on it. It wasn't in the schedule, but we move. Before that, though, Jen, thank you very much for the super sticker. Good question. Where is Kev? I will pass that on to him. Kev was meant to be on this week. Sutton come up, hoping to have him on next week. So Kev TV will be back in full swing in the near future, but he has assured me that he's completely fine. Just some things that had to be sorted. But Manchester City, obviously, Colin, they've had a fair few injuries over this international break. Rodri pulled out, I think, due to discomfort, and now he's back training with the national team, but he's not. He might be starting, but he wasn't starting. I think Spain plays today, so we'll see. Erling Haaland's not playing the second game due to ankle discomfort, which is what he did last time. And subsequently, they've got knocked out of the Euros, so clearly values Man City over Norway. Trying to think who else. Kovacic is injured. All of these quotation marks. Edison injured. Mateus Nunes injured. Very convenient that everybody is injured with very niggly issues right before the biggest game of the season, isn't it?
It's the worst kept secret, or honestly, I feel like if it was us and we did something like this, we would get actually punished. They would actually still open investigations to why Liverpool are lying about their players injury designations. It's the Alex Ferguson playbook 101. I have this discomfort, I can't continue on, but I didn't want to. You can't not send them, or totally in most cases can't send them not on international duty. So we send them and I picked up a little ankle discomfort, or this but not that, or a weird sickness. It's the most blatant obvious strategy that I've ever seen. And I guess the only good thing is that I think that really proves that City are scared of us. They're scared. And they know that they think that they need their players at absolutely full health, full capacity going into the game, because these injuries don't exist. They're all of these guys are going to be playing, every single one of them.
Yeah, I mean, Nahum, I think I saw the list, and John Stones is another one as well who pulled out just before. I think every single one of them, apart from KDB, is probably looking likely to be back. Maybe Kovacic, but it doesn't really start. I'm always always hesitant to be they are faking injuries. I do think that every team is probably guilty of exaggerating injuries when it comes to international duty. It would not surprise me if we did the same with, Curtis Jones for the under-21s, even Ryan Gravenberch and, Canate. We could have been look, not 100%, don't want to risk it. But at the same time, it's just very convenient, isn't it, for Man City that 50% of their starting 11 is injured before, what could be a title deciding game, in my opinion, anyway. Convenience, the word I'll use, not faking it. But what are your thoughts on it?
I'd agree. Yeah, awfully. I mean, it's suspect. Let's say there's a questionable nature to doing something like this. I agree that it's most likely we'll see on the weekend that all of these players will be in the starting 11, or most of them at the very least. I was, with the Haaland thing, it's when he pulled out, I think they were mathematically eliminated anyway. So I don't really blame him too much, because I think whether he was there or not, I don't think it actually had any sort of effect on the table afterwards. So that, that's one thing. I think, like you say, there's probably most teams who have a bunch of people going away for the international break do it. I imagine, like you say, Ryan Gravenberch is probably not too far from being fit, but going away on a camp in Europe isn't going to help that. It's obviously questionable when you're pulling players out sort of mid competition when they've already gone. But the question I suppose is that taking place? You'd assume ahead of that game that they are most likely fit and just kind of keeping themselves on the sidelines until the Liverpool game. But then you have to question, why did they go away in the first place? Whether that's to avoid suspicion or something else, who knows? But I would 100% agree that most of them are going to be there at the Etihad on the weekend. And I don't blame them too much for doing it. Like I say, that there is a reason to be scared of Liverpool. They've, I think if you ask any City fan, even with the Arsenal coming into their own last season and, Newcastle, United, these people making plays for top four, the one that the sort of a lot of City fans still respect regardless of form is usually Liverpool. They sort of have this perception of us where we kind of sort of are a bogey team for them. Even last season, doing our worst 1-0 win at Anfield. Remains to be seen whether we'll pull that kind of form off at the Etihad. But fundamentally, they have a reason to be scared, or cautious at least. And losing Rodri on the international break, as we've seen earlier this season, could be really detrimental. And a bunch of these other players. So I honestly, if I was a City fan, I would not be complaining, obviously, because it's their players. And I don't blame them too much for doing it if that's what they are doing. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see if Erling Haaland's on the pitch on the weekend, I guess. I was talking to my brother about this, actually. And I was sort of semi-celebrating that he was going to be absent. But my brother brought up a very good point that he would rather Erling Haaland not be on the pitch. And, at first glance, that's a sort of questionable statement because of how much the guy scores. But he pointed out that Virgil and Konate, or Virgil and Matip, are really well suited to the more physical striker, the big guys who sort of bombard through defenses. And you'd expect, a very physical league to handle guys like that. But Haaland obviously has made mincemeat of many defenses many times. But it's, I think we'd struggle against someone like Julian Alvarez more than we would Haaland. The sort of kind of gamey, quick attackers who sort of bamboozle defenses rather than the ones that bombard through them. Because Van Dijk's as big as they come, and you could clatter Erling Haaland on his best day. It's just, it'd be tough for it to get through him. He's the only one I'd rather be out, or rather be there, sorry. I think that's pretty reasonable for my brother anyway.
Yeah, I know. I was actually thinking the same thing. I think Matip, especially, his game is really, really suited to playing against big physical strikers like Antonio's, there's not many left in the Premier League, but Edward from Crystal Palace, Erling Haaland, 6 foot plus. I know, obviously, Erling Haaland. Yeah, obviously, Erling Haaland's really fast, but I think because of his body type, I just think Matip does really, really well with them. But as Jay Muse has said here, I think he's confirmed that he's fully fit to go anyway. Yeah. So it is what it is. We'll see who comes out, but I trust Joel Matip, Konate, and Van Dijk, whoever's playing there. But we will move on to our next one. However, before we do that, if you are new, make sure you do leave a like on the stream. Helps us grow, helps us get out there in the YouTube sphere. Also, subscribe with the bell notifications on so you don't miss a stream. We stream daily 7:30 when we can, and also post and pre-match. But on to the next topic, a potential Andy Robertson replacement, a player who a lot of people have been linked with, probably butchering his name, but Valentin Barco is a 19-year-old left-back from Boca Juniors. He has a lot of interest from a lot of Premier League and a lot of European clubs, Juventus, Man City, and Brighton being the main ones. His price is somewhere around the 8 million to 15 million pound range, kind of. I bet probably with the more teams that come forward, the higher that will go. Obviously, unless there's a release clause there, but he's a very, very highly rated left back who looks like he's going to be making a big move regardless of who he joins this summer. However, Liverpool have now been linked with him. He is being touted as a potential long-term Andy Robertson successor. Colin, thoughts on this? We've got Kostas Tsimikas there, who divides the fan base massively. I think half of our guests love him, half of them don't rate him. 2 assists in our last Premier League game. I think he's a very good backup. In my opinion, I don't think he'll ever get the mantelpiece off Andy Robertson. But I just don't see how we facilitate 3 left backs. I think one of them has to leave, and who leaves? Not Robertson. So it points the fingers of Tsimikas, surely.
It would seem to, unless the age and the expectation of his like skill set would be that he's not really going to touch the first team much until probably his second year in the team. I think that the kind of profile that he is something that, I and lots of the fan base have been asking to kind of really, consider more of, rather than, be looking at, 25, 35, 40 million pound, established players once they've, a year after they've made that move, or 2 years after they made that move, whatever. Looking at those, 10, 20, 25 million pounds from South America, or from a league that is not necessarily not the Premier League, essentially, where they're going to kind of demand those prices. I think that's something that, a lot of us have been asking for and looking at. So I think it makes sense, and I think the price makes sense with the profile. I don't necessarily think that it would be an immediate, need to get a left back out then. But I think that would mean probably within the year, or within the year and a half, 3 windows or something like that we would move one on.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Robertson's, 29, is going to be 30 in March next year, so before the season ends. As we know as well, an injury, this is probably his first big injury at Liverpool. We don't know how this is going to affect him. It could be nothing, or it could be the start of him picking up lots of niggles like we've seen with many, many players over the years. My opinion still stands that I think we will need a Robertson replacement regardless in the next few years. If this guy is okay to come in and maybe be around the first team, play cup games, play, the odd Europa League game, or, hopefully we're not here in the Europa League. So, cup games, under 21s, and train with the first team, similar to what the likes of Ben Doak, Luke Chambers, what Trey Nonny will probably be doing next season, Adam Scanlon, stuff like that. And then when Robertson's ready to kind of say, okay, look, your time's come, then move him up. But I don't know. Would he choose us over Brighton or City, where he's probably going to come in and fight to be a starter in the Premier League? I feel like we can't offer him as much as other teams. Would you agree, or do you think maybe we offer him more?
I think it's a good question. I think there's always going to be someone like Brighton who have a renowned sort of reputation for bringing people out of the South American leagues, playing them almost immediately, and then getting them that big move once they've established them as a big player. And that's a really enticing proposition. Brighton are moving up in the world these days, so you have to consider whether people like Purvis or Stupinian can really be taken out of that starting spot. That it starts to become this kind of conversation even with places like Brighton, whether that youth system is going to persist with all the money they've got in the recent years. City, I really don't see him getting in as much as he would here, because Pep is rigid in his ways a lot of the time. He's fluid on the pitch, but quite frankly, when players start and they do well, it's really hard for people to break into that squad. Rico Lewis broke in, and that he fits very much the same profile half the time, at least, as Valentin Barco. So you have to ask, is there an element of they already have that youth player coming up through the ranks? They've already got on the left and right players who are well established in their positions. They've got backups for days. You've got Kyle Walker on the right, and then even below the starting 11 on the left side, you've got people like Sergio Gomez. Rico Lewis can play there as well. Nathan Ake can jump in at left back, and they've got this sort of system where they might play all the centre backs. Here, we have Robertson, we have Tsimikas, and Klopp's got a long drawn out history of giving youth players the start that they need when they need it. And there's obviously questions about the players and the player himself, whether that sort of transfer from the South American leagues into a very physical, the best league on the planet, quite frankly, into as well a top contender where that's good for a career. You don't want to get a reputation for ruining players like him, in case that happened. But I would be a massive fan of it if we could get him here. It's like you say, it's a really good question whether the player would choose it. And there's right now, I think if I were him, places like Brighton would be the obvious choice, because it's not disbarring you from in 2 years being sold for 100 million to someone like Liverpool. I have always been a fan of Liverpool moving towards plucking players right out of their sort of regional leagues. And if we did this, I'd be quite excited. There's concerns about the player, things like he's 5'5". How does that translate into a very physical league? But he looks, for all the world, like that sort of. He does look a lot like Robertson in some ways. So there's a natural press resistance about him. He's quite quick with his feet. It's not very hard to knock him off his feet as well. So the sort of things where he's crawling for the ball and sprinting up the byline, plays in the left mid position a lot as well. But all of that is still true for the lower league side, and when I say lower, I mean like sort of 6th, 7th place, like Brighton, who can give him week on week starts. So like I say, if I was him, I'd go to Brighton. But as a Liverpool fan, I think it's more than sensible if he did come here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I want to kind of touch on really quickly his play style. Colin, we've seen, teams such as Manchester City kind of basically playing a four at the back with 4 centre backs. A lot of teams are kind of moving similar towards that, or if not, at least one of their full backs is a central defender, and then the right or left back moves into midfield. Something we have kind of been trying, but sadly at the moment we don't have somebody who can play that left centre back, left back role, which has meant we have been linked very heavily with the likes of Goncalo Inacio, Hincapié, even Lloyd Kelly to a certain extent. Basically central defenders who can play left back or the left-sided centre-back. If we were to go for Valentin Barco, we would be pushing that idea out, I think, because he is the exact mold to Robertson, pretty much. As Nahu mentioned there, he's even smaller. He's 5'5". We're not going to be playing a 5'5" player at centre back. And as well, I think he plays left midfield and left wing for Boca Juniors. So, your opinion, would you prefer an Andy Robertson regen, I'll call it, or do you think, what we're trying to build at the moment kind of we steer away from that and look for a left-sided centre-back like we have been linked with?
I wonder if the larger story about us, the interest in him is not sort of like everybody's interested in him, in reality, because I don't think from that perspective, from the perspective of like his size, his skill set, it makes much sense for us to, it's been pretty well documented that we are interested in people who can play left back, left center back. That's been pretty well documented across the summer and throughout the year. So having someone that is, you mentioned, very skillful, and is able to really push forward and be the widest player in an attacking third. It doesn't fit with the idea that would be kind of how we were, playing with, a majority of center backs at the back. It could maybe give credence to the idea that maybe we would get another Joe Gomez type who can play right back, and then the three the three would be the 2 center backs, the 2 traditional center backs, and then the right back could be a 3 at the back. But I think getting a true blue Andy Robertson regen or style player who is going to push forward, is going to be that widest or shift into that widest position in the middle or the final third, makes a ton of sense based on what we have seen documented. But I'm sure that could have changed between now and then, if they don't feel like there's really great options at kind of left center back who can play left back, then maybe it's a different idea. Maybe it's something that we'll see kind of a change in the strategy going forward.
Yeah, and whom I kind of bring that same question to you, just really quickly before we end. Do you see us, abandoning this whole left centre back idea, which I don't think we will, purely because of how good Trent is in it. We've kind of forced ourselves to do that because of how good Trent dictates play from midfield. Or do you think we scrap it and go back to old reliable and get Andy Robertson V2?
I think I would hope the club's learned its mistakes in that regard. Sort of like, if you can bring a player in like Valentin Barco, and then also can persist with the very obvious plan of our sort of 3-2-2-3 system where we have this inverted right back, that's what I would hope for. This guy's going for around 10 million. Is it too much to ask for? Do you get this left centre back to put depth behind Virgil? You have that option for the three at the back, and then you have a younger player who plays the cup games, Europa League games for as long as we're in it, hopefully, just this season. And then there's that sort of City-esque depth where whatever happens, because Pep will switch between formations, at least 4 times a season. He's playing a 4-1-4-1 right now. At the start of the season, he's playing a 4-2-3-1. And this sort of fluidity comes from the ability to have, Sergio Gomez on the left versus Nathan Ake. And that's something that it's so valuable, especially when you're changing side to side each week. I'd hope we'd learn a mistake and get both. If I could choose one, I would go for the left centre back option. Like you say, it would be stupid to not persist with the sort of inverted right back role. Like, Trent has been amazing in dedicated midfield for his country. He leaves things to be desired at club level, but in the inverted role, he's looked better defensively somehow. He's dictating play from the middle. And, even when we have a weaker sort of defensive midfield option in McAllister, who, obviously is doing his best, and he's been doing really well in that role, it's better to have someone who's playing a sort of, faux double pivot with him, who can spray those passes. It's something that Klopp's clearly fallen in love with. It was an intermediary thing. It was something that was meant to be only a thing for as long as we didn't have good midfielders. But now, even with that creativity in midfield, we've kept it there because it really, really works. And even with that sort of Szoboszlai, Trent chemistry, it's working better. So if I had to choose one, it would definitely be the 3 centre-backs.
Oh, I think he might have cut out.
If I could, suggest something to the...
Hello? You're back.
You're
back. It was only for like a second.
All right. Well, yeah. Just a bit. Do both.
Yeah, I think we all agree that probably... if we had to choose, the left centre-back is definitely the one we'd want, but we shouldn't have to be choosing. It's 10 million. Get Alexis McAllister on the phone to him. Get Alisson on the phone to him, And the fact he can play left wing as well, I think, helps his cause, because we know Klopp loves a player who can play multiple positions. So if he can play anywhere along the left-hand side, I think that's the type of players we like. However, let's go on to the next topic. Before we do that, though, make sure you do leave a like on the stream and also subscribe to the channel with the bell notifications on. Also, too, guys, get your comments in. I'm storing some of the questions that we'll answer them at the end. So get your comments in, and we'll at the end of the stream we'll answer as many as we can. Next story, though, Leroy Sane, been very heavily linked with him. I think he's only got a year and a half left on his contract at Bayern Munich. He has been one of their star players this year, linked really well up with Harry Kane, and he's been less injury prone than he usually has. Also, the reports from Germany are kind of saying that he's not 100% convinced on signing a deal and would be open to a move. This has opened the door for Liverpool, and they're now saying that Bayern Munich should be scared of Liverpool's interest in him, as Jurgen Klopp dreams of signing him. Colin, I'll start with you. 27 years old, injury prone, left winger. Can play on the right as well, but predominantly left winger. Feels like a few years ago this would have been a great signing. But probably for the price that Bayern will, they'll probably just stiff us over regardless because of what we got Gravenberch for, and just I feel like we don't have the best relationship with Bayern. But he's probably going to cost upwards of 40 million, in today's market. I'm not saying he's not a great player. We have seen against us, he absolutely tore us apart every single time he played. And, we've had interviews with Joe Gomez saying he's the hardest player he's ever had to play against.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this is a few years too late. What about you?
Yeah, I don't. It's interesting to me that this story continues to persist because it doesn't make sense based on profile or probable price. I think Bayern are like, they're not the hardest people to do business with. Like, they're pretty like cut and dry. Go figure. They're pretty cut and dry about like they do business a certain way, and if you're willing to do business with them in that way, then they're willing to talk. It just seems like for the age, for the injury history, obviously that you cited, that it's something that has passed. I wonder if the interest is not continuing to be registered with them based on, the kind of ever-changing Mo Salah situation. And I wonder if, they maybe have kind of learned their lesson with, being blindsided by both Henderson and Fabinho going without like a great plan to replace him immediately. And maybe they've learned kind of in this post that, okay, so we're not 100% sure if Mo's going to stay or if he's going to go. So we need to, if he does go, we need to have a plan set in place that we can act on immediately if that were to be the case. That seems the most likely scenario for why we are continuing to be interested, but I don't see where he would fit into the team if it wasn't Mo in Mo's spot. Like I don't see where he kind of plays or would want to come and sit on the bench. I don't see that.
Yeah, I mean, Nahuma, it feels like it just goes against everything we've been looking at recently. The players we've been bringing in: Luis Diaz, Cody Gakpo, McAllister, Szoboszlai. These players are all under 24 when we signed them. They're, even I think Jota was 23 when we signed him. I know it's been a few years, or 24, whatever. It's just. Do you think this might be a classic Jurgen Klopp? We've heard stories about him having to be talked away from signing, German talent, Goretzka, Brandt, and we signed better, maybe not Brandt situation, but definitely in the Goretzka one where I think we signed Salah instead. It feels like he's just. I don't know what it feels like, but it doesn't feel right because he's 28 in January next year. And if he can play on the right, I think he's got eight goals, 6 assists in 11 games. Obviously, Bayern have scored something ridiculous, like 50 goals in 11 matches. He's not going to get the same dominance at Liverpool. And I know we talked about injury history. I had a quick look up. He hasn't been injured for about a year, so hopefully that's behind him, but knowing Liverpool, if he did join, he'd probably break his leg. But it's a strange one, isn't it? What are your thoughts on it?
So, I'm going to be in contention with you guys. I think it's a good idea. I think it sounds bad when you look at it. So, like, he's 27 years old, obviously. I mean, this season he's been playing on the right. He's left-footed, which is obviously sort of the profile we'd be looking to somewhat emulate or just completely copy. It's 2 years above what we'd usually sign. So the rumored range is 23 to 26. 28, it's not the best, but the guy is world class, quite frankly. Like Leroy Sane, every game I've watched him, especially in games like the preseason game against us, against Bayer Leverkusen earlier this season, which was a cracker of a game. We've known this in City. He's been a class player for a very long time, and equally you have to think about sort of the financials of this situation. If you want to buy a really good right winger to slip right into sort of Salah's spot, then you can go too young, or not too young. You can go young. You can try and look to build that experience up with the cheaper sort of financial side of it. You could drop a fully fledged right winger for 100 million right into a spot and hope to sort of directly replace the talent. Or there's an option like Leroy Sane, who's running towards the end of his contract in not too distant future, could be made cheaper because of that. We've got relatively okay relations with Bayern on the transfer front, and he can be dropped in with experience and talent into the right wing position, even if it's only for a few years. Because at 28, sure, okay, let's say he's only a viable option until he's 30. By the time he's 30, there's a very real possibility we've already identified the next target, and you don't want to be persistently buying people for the rent till the end of time. But players like him, players like Salah will go for a long time. I think it's a sensible move depending on how much you can get him for. So if he's dozens and dozens of millions, it's really not sustainable. If you can get him somewhere 40, 50 million mark, which might be unattainable, who knows, depending on how much they produce him by in the last year of his contract, then I think it makes perfect sense. Right winger, cutting on his left, clearly a world-class talent. It's something that he's got experience in the Prem as well with a Prem winning side. I think in a lot of areas, it ticks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, I mean, the price is the big question here. You know, it's
agreed.
It's how much. We know Bayern Munich are very, very persistent. If they say this is how much we want, the likelihood of you getting that down without a player pushing for it, is very low. Even with the Gravenberch deal, I think everyone was happy with what we paid and they were happy with what they got. We met in the middle because of his pushing, but I feel like if he weren't pushing, he probably would have wanted something like 40, 50. They're very good negotiators, and at the end of the day, they're one of the biggest clubs in the world, so they don't really need money at the end of the day. But yeah, I do agree with Jurgen. I think it's what route do you want to go down? Do you want to... This route kind of feels like we're banking on Ben Doak to have a good 3 years, while Sané would be the first choice, which I think is risky purely because of his injury history. And if he does get injured, you're then relying on Ben Doak, who might not be ready. However, you're probably in a similar situation if we go and buy a 24-year-old. So it's it's a strange one. I personally don't think I'd pay anything over 50 million for him. I think
agreed. Yeah.
Once you get into that money, I just don't think it's worth it off his age, his history. I think he's a world-class player on his day or even now, but it's we aren't blessed with unlimited funds and we have to spend them wisely. And one player I'll throw out there who's having a great season after we were interested in, Johan Bakayoko from PSV, absolutely flying. I think he'd be a great potential signing. We missed out on a similar profile in Jeremy Doku, who we were chasing for years. I would like to get this one if we could, and he'd be under 50 million, so it's money that can go elsewhere. But we will move on to our final story, which is the big one. However, before we do that, please do leave a like on the stream and subscribe to the channel. Get your comments in too as well, and we'll read them towards the end of the stream. But Luis Diaz's father is in the news once again. Obviously, after scoring his 2 goals and the very emotional celebration we saw, Luis Diaz's father come out in an interview and a journalist asked him, I think, about Barcelona. And he proceeded to say that is Luis Diaz's dreams of playing for Barcelona one day. It's his dream club. He did also say that, there's no talks going on, and even if there were, he wouldn't say anything. Colin, not really a surprise because every single, South American player dreams of playing for Barcelona and Real Madrid. It's just a stupid thing to say. Like, I understand his dad's getting a lot of press, and he isn't press trained, but I'm sure when Luis Diaz heard about that, he probably had a few quiet words with his dad, didn't he?
Yeah, every single player in or from a kind of Spanish-speaking country, that their dream is to play for Barcelona or Real Madrid, and at a certain point, it's like you can't really. I'm past the point where I can really like knock people for like feeling that way. Like it just an acceptance of like that's the way that it is for so many cultures and so many people in so many places in the world. I think probably like his father was literally just imprisoned and and kidnapped, so like he probably had a lot of time to like sit and think about like his life, I'm sure, and like there was a lot I'm sure that he like has been going through his mind in a really like stressful, strenuous, maybe the most stressful time in his life. So I don't really like put too much stock in I guess in him just kind of like being, like you said, he's press trained, just like being being spoken to by reporters and like just talking about like the things that are probably on his mind and like the things that are that he has probably spent time thinking about over the past what's it, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It just is like it's almost like a non-story. Like I get it, I understand. It is for players from those cultures, and it just is like it just screams to me like a man just talking about his feelings and talking about his family. So
yeah, I mean, Nahum, as Colin said there, it's not really a surprise. I feel like you could probably ask most South American players, and a good 70% of them would say, if not more, that them two Spanish clubs are their dream per se. It's just from a Liverpool perspective, it's not surprising. It's just annoying. Like it's, for me anyway. It's just like, why say it? And I know we've mentioned he's not media trained. He's probably just like, he's probably being asked a question like, Barcelona, Luis Diaz, and he's like, oh well, he was a Barcelona fan growing up, and it's just been spun, and it's bad, but it's not really what we need, not what Luis Diaz needs, and I'm sure it's probably not Luis Diaz's actual feelings. I'm sure he's very happy playing for Liverpool. But what are your thoughts on that?
I didn't bat an eyelid at it, to be honest. Like you say, not surprised me. In the slightest. It's one of those things. Barcelona's for the longest time been a very, very worldwide popular club. It's the club of Leo Messi. It's like you say, hardly surprising someone from Colombia is going to want to play for that club. But who cares? Because like I say, I'm sure he's very happy playing for Liverpool. At the end of the day, Luis Diaz is going to cost a pretty penny that I'm sure Barcelona doesn't really have right now. They are looking, obviously, to someone for that left wing role permanently. Right now, they've got João Felix on the left in loan till June next year, I think it is. So there's a possibility they're going to go in for someone who at left wing. I'd be surprised if they forked out what could be upwards of 80 million for Luis Diaz. He is the most expensive player in our squad right now, if you don't count the sort of Saudi evaluations of Salah. Sensibly so as well, Luis Diaz is an extremely good left winger and good player overall. He makes sense for Liverpool. I think mutually, he probably, from everything I've seen, he loves the club. The club definitely loves him. And if he did want to play for Barcelona one day, I can't blame him. But Barcelona's going to have to fork over quite a bit of money for that to happen. And I'm sure he won't be pushing too hard for it. So I can't imagine it happens very soon.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll do a little hypothetical thing with Luis Diaz. Talked about it a bit in the chat. What would be your what would it take to sell Luis Diaz for you? Let's say Barcelona aren't financially ruined, which they are regardless. So this question probably isn't even on the table unless they sold a large majority of their players, because they're not going to be able to afford 80 plus million, which 80 would be the minimum in my eyes. But Coutinho-esque situation. Luis Diaz is pushing for a move. He wants to go to Barca. How much would you be willing to sell for him? And I'll let you have a little bit of time to think on it. My kind of thought is, out of everybody, Luis Diaz is by far the most replaceable in my eyes. I think he is an absolutely great left winger. However, I think he's not as... he's not as talented or exciting or raw. He's still a phenomenal footballer, and he's up against the other best attackers in the world. But I would much rather lose Luis Diaz than Darwin Núñez or Mohamed Salah. I think them two are absolutely key to our team, whereas you can bring in Diogo Jota or even Darwin on the left, and they do a similar job. Maybe they're not as direct as him. He's very Sadio Mane-esque, especially when Mane first joined, where he's straight at attackers, and he's not made find a scoring boots a little bit this season. Obviously before everything happened. But I would be open to selling him if I was open to selling anybody in our attack, outside, like Jota or Gakpo. But again, then probably not going anywhere. I think for me, that at the bare minimum, I would be looking at is 100 million. I think 100 million would be where I would start to negotiate, and I'd be looking around 120 million. In all honesty, I think the market went up since Coutinho, and he is a world-class player in my eyes. Potential only to get better. He's still young, and again, we've saw over the past few weeks how important he is to Colombia. He's probably going to be the face of their football for a while. He's always one of the best players. So I think 120 million would be a nice price, but I'd probably go anywhere from 100 million, and I think that gives us enough cash to replace him. Yeah. Colin, your thoughts? Obviously all hypothetical, but have a bit of fun.
Yeah, I think that would I think your kind of reasoning on that makes sense. I think just the amount of people and players at an elite level who are right-footed, who have those kinds of same attributes, who can play that position, is just off the top of my head much higher than left-footed ones. In this, if we were talking about the Mo Salah's, Leroy Sane's, left-footed players who play on the right to be able to cut in, I think that there are many more players who are of a high quality who can play on the left with that right-footed ability. I think probably the number that immediately popped into my mind was 110, which is right in your range, 110, 115. I certainly don't think that we should do Barcelona any favors if this hypothetical were to kind of come to fruition. I would not do them any favors. I would try to get absolutely as much money as possible. They've proved that they're willing to kind of spend irresponsibly in the past. And just because that they're now in this spot where they don't have the spending ability doesn't mean that if they did have the money that they would spend it responsibly. 110, 115, I think would be that's what I would expect for a player like that.
Yeah, Nahum, James has said here, his transfer value is 65. He'd take 80 if you could get a replacement. I mean, I think Sané is 75 million, so I wouldn't say, and I'd say Luis Diaz is a hell of a lot more valuable in every single sense of the word than Leroy Sane, basing it off, every attribute, age, injury record, skill. The face of football. I know he's not the face of football, but his face in the football media. I think 85's a hell of a lot too low. Do you?
I think it depends who you're talking about. If we're talking about Barcelona, the price goes up for me. But if you're talking about generally on the market, I think in a year and a half we'll be laughing at the fact that 65 was ever mentioned. But 90 to 95 would be the lowest I'd ever go. Barcelona are in need of a left winger. And can be rinsed, as we've seen before. So for them, it goes up to 100, but 90 is sort of the lowest I would go, I think. That's around the price I'd start negotiating. But like you say, someone in the chat said it's Jamie's, I think it was. Yeah, if you can get a replacement, it's all dependent on that as well. How much we need him versus how much they need him. And for Barcelona, there's quite a big argument to have that money go up because they need a left winger. We still need Luis Diaz. So it's that question. I will say, though, I disagree with your idea of him being the most replaceable. I would never replace, like, let's say Darwin Núñez. He's more protected, let's say. Obviously, Salah's irreplaceable in a certain way. I think at left wing, he is the only out-and-out left winger. Because if you think about Gakpo, he'd be playing centre forward. Jota started his Liverpool career at centre forward with Mane on the left. Both those players regularly play in the middle as opposed to out on the left. Darwin Núñez should be a striker rather than he was last season. But Diaz doesn't play anywhere else, and he's really, really good at what he does. And I think it'd be remiss to say that we could replace him faster than we could Jota. There's a reason he's the most expensive player in the squad if we were to sell him, theoretically anyway. Obviously, that's not really true with Saudi in the mix, but he is, like I say, in a year and a half, we'll be laughing people out the door who were talking about 65 million. It's not a realistic fee. I think he could really go places, but I think he's such a credit to the squad. 95 is the very lowest, 90-95, and I'd be looking for Coutinho money. That's the sort of thing that I'd be thinking of.
Yeah, definitely. To be fair, I worded myself wrong. I kind of meant out of what I think our best front three is, which is Diaz, Salah, Mane, Diaz, Salah, Núñez. I think I'd sell him, but I see where you're coming from.
Okay, I agree with that.
If you had Jota and Gakpo there, I think, someone mentioned before, Diogo Jota does nothing for 80 minutes and then scores a winner. Which is great if you're on our team. Obviously, it's been annoying to watch, but it's fine. We move. All right, we've got a few more minutes. If you want to get your questions in, we'll go through a few. I've started a couple. Just do some quick fire questions and just to go over the half past, and then we'll end the stream. But again, guys, while you're putting questions in, make sure you do leave a like and subscribe to the channel with the bell notification on. Okay, did anyone watch the England game?
I did not watch it. I heard it was a misery fest. I heard it was real bad.
Did you know whom?
I only caught bits of it. I didn't see the whole thing, no.
Okay, we'll skip over that then because it's a question about England. Okay, Joe Gomez or Kostas Tsimikas at left back against City. Nahum, I'll start with you. Who would you go for?
It's a good question. I have always been a massive proponent of Joe Gomez left back. Obviously, started life at Liverpool there. And I think he's really impressed me this season because he's been a gamble to put on the pitch at all times. You don't know who he's going to freeze in front of or what mistakes he's going to make. Like if you could put in a sort of Aston Villa 3-0 this season performance, or he could have thrown out a stinker like 5-2 Real Madrid. It really don't know what you get with him. This season he's looked really assured everywhere he's played on the pitch. He's played left back, centre back in both positions, and at right back. So there's an argument for him, but quite frankly, there is an element that we could have Doku at right wing, flying at him. And there's a good chance that Joe Gomez freezes in front of that. Last year we see what Matoma did to him, unfortunately, and I'd rather not see him appear on any more Twitter highlight reels, to Ice Spice or whatever. So I'm gonna go Tsimikas just to avoid that. But I wouldn't be too upset if I saw him on the starting sheet, Gomez, that is.
I'll throw a couple of curveballs here for you, Colin. I think he's much better at right back. I think at left back, he just doesn't look as comfortable. Would you potentially play? This will not happen, but I was thinking about it before. Joe Gomez at right back, and then Matip, then Van Dijk. I can't speak. Jeez. And then at left back, play Trent in the inverted role at right back. I don't think that's out of the question. I think that wouldn't be terrible because you then can kind of say to Virgil, okay, look, Jeremy Doku is your job. Just destroy him every time he comes towards you.
He's the scariest player on their team. Every time I watch them, I'm like, oh, he's the one. He's the one that like really, really scares me. I hadn't considered that, Charlie. That's a great call.
It's a difficult one because as well, you could also, if Konate is injured, I would not be against playing a back three of Konate, Matip, and Van Dijk, and then having Matip as that centre back three who can kind of just win every single header and then you have the pace of Canate at right centre back and Virgil at left centre back. But is Canate injured, and will Klopp even do that? You know, we're thinking so far out the box. Yeah, I don't even think it's possible, but it's always fun to think about.
Yeah, I didn't even give any consideration to that. I don't hate that idea at all, actually, because I think, I mean, to answer the question that was asked directly, I don't want Kostas Tsimikas anywhere near Jeremy Doku, anywhere near him. I think he will get cooked. And I'm not a Kostas Tsimikas like out and out hater, but I think Jeremy Doku's like his pace is something that I don't think Kostas can even contend with, like at all. I just think it's out of the cards. So whatever option is not Kostas, like I think that's what will be done, whether that's Joe Gomez on the left or whoever, or like you said, maybe Trent starts left, but really just kind of immediately slides inside, and then it is a real back three. I could see that, and I think that would be a better solution to the problem than Kostas playing on the left and trying to track Jeremy Doku up and down.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one because I think, we know how these two love to play mind games with each other, Pep and Klopp. So wouldn't surprise me if they both come out with mad formations or, a mad player in there. But it's an interesting one. I think we've got a lot of options, thankfully, especially if Canate is fit. I do really think my preferred one. I think I would choose Tsimikas to answer the main question. I just don't trust Gomez at left back, but I would love to see a back three. If I'm going to be honest, I think it'd be very fun to see. Okay, last one. This could be its own stream in itself. But basically, what do you think would be a good punishment for Manchester City? Humongous fine, no transfers for a year, Champions League, relegation conference. Obviously, this is coming off the back of Everton getting 9 points deducted and kind of opening the floodgates, because it does seem like a very harsh punishment considering, what else is happening with Man City. Nahum, what do you think? I think everyone's got a lot of strong opinions on it. I guess I'll give you mine really quickly. I think the amount of stuff they have broken since 2010, I think the only fair punishment is relegating them as far as they can physically go, which I think is League Two. I don't think they can get put into the National League. I don't know if I read that wrong somewhere, but I'm not sure. So if you can get put in the National League, see you later. I think the biggest fine that they can possibly do, literally in the hundreds of millions, because that's how much they've earned off, they've earned billions off what they've won from cheating. I think 3-year transfer ban and a 5-year ban from Europe. That would be mine. I know it's very harsh, but it's 115 charges spanning, nearly 15 years. And in them 15 years, whether we like it or not, they have become one of the biggest clubs in world football. But Nahum, what are your thoughts? What do you think they should get? Obviously, it's a very difficult question to answer in a few minutes, but sum it up.
It's thing is, there's a lot of questions about what the charges they were that broke, obviously. So like there's a lot of it's sort of underreporting, like sponsorship income and things like this. And it's you have to. I don't know about relegating them as far as they can go. You need to basically. There's one thing that's good about your suggestion. You need to make sure that this isn't a slap on the wrist. And the problem with like relegating them, even that is like too not down to League Two, but if you relegate them to the Championship, that's too soft a punishment. But League Two is too harsh, I think. League, if they went down to the Championship, that's one season. Then the next season is back to regular business. Of course, they would win the Championship, and then they'd be in the Prem. They'd probably win it the next season as well. So I think I saw some creative things like limiting their funds into the club from player sales only. So that means they can't access the sort of Saudi wealth fund anymore, where that means they'd have to start selling players or risk running out of money. I think a transfer ban, there's pretty much no point. They've got enough players already now that they'd probably do all right, I think. I'm not too interested in trophy reallocation. stripping it off them would be fine, but I don't want them. It's it's gone now, and it's something that you have to just move on from. Forfeiting them is a good option there. I think so. Forfeiting the titles they have determined to have been won from the money that they illicitly got. Banned from receiving money from exterior funds, i.e. their owners. I think maybe avoiding relegation. I think it should be more sort of point deductions for the next few seasons. So sort of like what Everton got, but for 3 or 5 seasons. I don't know about a Europe ban. It depends how much that would financially affect them. Because what you want to do is you want to hinder them in a way that it's, sort of proportional to the amount of charges they broke and to which ones they did break, and make it so that it's something that actually will affect them. So banning them from transfers, I'm unsure how much that would actually affect them, given the players they already have right now and the youth setup they've got. Whereas in 3 seasons, they could still really have a world-class squad. But if you force them to sell players,
just really quickly, what I understand where you come from. What do you think of? I agree that maybe relegating them so far is, to League Two is a bit. I think the Championship's too lenient, like you said. Thinking about it, I think a good punishment relegation wise would be to the Championship with like 100-point deduction, so that they're definitely not getting promoted to the Premier League the year after. So they get relegated and then start off with like negative 100 points.
But then why not just my answer was going to be send them to League One and take 25 points off them to start the season. So they start League One and they're 25
but they're
points
going to
down.
win at League One regardless. I think it'd need to be more than 25 points.
So and I think that would only be useful if it is you are not allowed to bring people in. And like Nahum said, it would be something like, only being able to bring in funds from player sales. Like if they get relegated to League One, so that's 2. It's minimum, right? 2 seasons where those players who would be on the team would not be, who wouldn't be able to, to play in the Premier League. The majority of those players are out. They're going to leave.
Oh, well, they have to be, because while they are there, they will have to abide by, financial fair play laws still. Right. Even the FA ones, which I think have been brought in to kind of mimic the Champions League ones, and they're not going to be getting hundreds of millions from TV sponsors in League One, so they can't afford to pay Erling Haaland 600 grand a week. But sorry, Nahum, continue. I butted in. But...
No problem. I mean, it's more interesting. But like, it's like I'm trying to find a middle ground of what I'm trying to say. You guys have sort of brought it to me that there's an element where you could relegate them and then continuously dock them points to make sure that's something that sticks. So if they get relegated, that's a massive financial impact off the bat. And then you have to make sure that from there, the point deductions are so many that it keeps them in that position for just long enough to be proportional to the crimes, let's say. We have to remember that the Premier League are going to be reluctant to do that because of how much money will come from Manchester City. So they're going to be lenient as much as they can be, quite frankly, and it won't go down well if they relegate them at all. So going to League One's probably never going to happen.
Which is ridiculous that the ability to punish them is decided by someone who also has a financial interest in keeping them up. Like that's preposterous. It's absolutely
I think it'll be a massive point deduction because of what they have. Because I feel like they've set a precedent with this Everton thing, which I think is what they wanted to do, which is, look, you're going to get like a 90-point deduction. Good.
They threatened to reject them last time they spoke about this. They threatened to actually, sort of eject them from the league altogether, which of course is always an option. We have to remember this is the first time. This is not the first time they've done this, and I don't know if this can be sort of brought upon, but a lot of City fans like to live in their own world where they think they got proven innocent with the whole UEFA charges a few years back when they got banned from Europe. They were proven guilty, which is why they got fined. They went to court arbitration. The only reason the charges didn't stick is because it was outside the statute of limitations. It was longer than 5 years ago the infractions happened, so they weren't punished. So they did, in fact, back pay their manager through illicit means. They did underreport sponsorship income, and they have shown a history of criminal intent in that area. The only reason it wasn't sticking is because it was longer than 5 years, which is obviously the world's biggest technicality. That would have been a 2-year ban from UEFA competitions, from the Champions League. And the problem with that is it didn't stick. If this can stick, I would like to see them bring that up at least, sort of the intent of the club has been clear in the past. They've done this before, and it won't be the last time they do it if you let them get away with it.
If you take Everton's temp, it's 1,150 points deduction. If you take Everton's punishment and extrapolate that to all of their charges. Now, obviously, like you said, like all of the charges are not the same. They're not all identical, so not necessarily going to all be 10 points, but some of them could be more. Some of them will be.
I think a lot of them are going to be more. I mean, Everton's was what they didn't declare 19 million or something. I mean, we know for a fact that they are blagging sponsorships. They're getting like 200 million for 4-year deals from Saudi companies who have one employee who's cousins with the owner, and like they have like 10 followers on Twitter.
It's
and
the most
like don't even have company
obvious
websites.
Like scheme and fraud that like has ever been committed in a high level like sporting organization. Like it is the most obvious thing I've ever seen in my life, and anybody who is like really really is like, no, that's not happening, like is a liar or is like truly ignorant.
So something has to happen, like regardless of whether that's a point deduction or an absolutely massive fine. If they come out of this unscathed and they say, yeah, none of them charges were real, then football is already corrupt anyway. But we will have a 100% answer, because it is clear for us free to see who have no financial, we don't know anything about finance football wise, we're just fans who are interested in clubs, in our clubs, and watch from the side of our eye other teams. You do not need to be a lawyer to be like, look, this company who has paid these 200 million does not exist. They are not a real company. And regardless of what other fines they have, I think that they're the ones that are nailed on. We don't know what the 115 fines are, but them ones where they are falsifying sponsorships, paying them hundreds of millions a year, which they have been doing for 15 years, according to some of the charges that have been. Whenever it happens, it's going to be big. It's probably going to.
What would be a fine that you guys would think would be acceptable? Because we talked about point deduction, we talked about relegation, like and you mentioned, Charlie, like it would only be relevant if they're either being fined or if they were not going to be relegated. What is a fine that we think that would, because they reported $700 million in revenue last year, so even if you find them $1 billion, you're talking about less than a year and a half's worth of earnings.
Yeah, I mean,
I think hundreds and hundreds of millions.
I think it'll have to be 500 million, but at the same time, obviously we don't know what's happening, but let's say the outcome is you're getting a 500 million pound fine, you are getting a 80 point deduction that will go on effective immediately, and then they will probably appeal that straight away. But thankfully, the appeal process takes a lot less time. I think it just goes to another independent board and it gets looked over again, not as in detail. So the points will be deducted straight away regardless. But that fine, they are probably never going to pay that fine. Like, if we're being honest, they will hold that money up in litigation or lawyers or for decades, for literally ever. Like the thing is, that money means nothing to them. Like that is a drop in the ocean for them. I think my ideal
principle, they just would never. They're never paying it as long as it is possible.
Exactly, and I think best case scenario is they get that money and it then get. I don't even want it, and we've probably been robbed out of hundreds of millions from them cheating. Because again, another thing, what obviously Burnley, Leicester are doing, they're trying to get damages. That then would open the floodgates for the likes of us, for the likes of Man United who come second. But then where do you stop it? Because you can then argue the clubs who missed out on top four, the clubs who finished fifth, you can argue, clubs in the Champions League,
Yeah.
can they then come and, you know, where does it go? Where do you stop this? The clubs who they knocked out, who finished third in the group, can they come? You know, whenever the decision comes in, it's going to be a mess, not just for British football or English football, but for world football. I think it's going to set so many precedents. But I personally, I would like to see a massive fine that can be fed down the Football League system, and it's spread out fairly, you know, not just to league, you know, send it down to, you know, National League and stuff like that. But, you know, sadly, it looks like the Middle East are going to be owning football in a few years, so who knows how long this can go on for. But it's a really interesting topic, and I know we are obviously a Liverpool fan channel, but at the end of the day, we've been fighting these for, you know, years.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for Manchester City cheating, who knows? You know, Jurgen Klopp could be in the conversation for, you know, the best manager ever. So it's frustrating, but it's a fun thing to talk about, and thankfully, we aren't run like that, so we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But it has been a very good one. Nahum, Colin, thank you very much for joining. All the people in the chat, thank you very much for getting involved. We will be live tomorrow at the usual time of 7:30. So if you aren't, make sure you subscribe to the channel with the bell notifications on so you don't miss any. But I've been Charlie. This has been the LSG Transfer Room, and thank you very